Miss Rummicky set down her paper copy of Humanity's Bloodlust onto her desk, the question from one of her students having caught her off guard. "I'm sorry, can you ask that again?" "Is there a reason why humans are so murdery?" the djinn asked, her mask embellished with engravings of flowers and her forearms resting on her desk. "You've been going on and on about their wars, the famous murders, the coups, and the decimation of the Daramir. But is there a reason why they're all like this?" Miss Rimmicky took in a deep breath as she looked around the room. She could see that they all seemed to have the same question in their eyes, and she was hoping they would have just taken the short history lesson for what it was. "It is a difficult question to answer, more so for the simplicity of it," Miss Rimmicky said, then took one of the new manufacturer memory cache cards and plugged it into the data display on the wall. "Humanity may not be the most violent of the star's children, as I believe that award goes to the Daramir, but they are by far the most violent within the Confederation." The display glowed to life, showing a pair of male human toddlers play fighting with sticks. While the Kerlaken and Yorpal may be predatory evolutions, and the Jinn, Optican, and Poit prey evolutions, none of them appear to have the predatory drive of the humans. For the current predatory evolutions of society, it was merely a means to an end, and there are very little histories of Kerlaken or Yorpal taking a distinct pleasure in doing what they had to do in order to survive. The Nimiki, despite being a predator evolution, became extremely weepy when taking life, even under the most dire circumstances. "They're the odd-looking plant lovers, aren't they?" a Kerlaken asked, her long neck adorned with human-made jewelry she had picked up from one of the traders. A Poit chuckled to himself. "They recently got into a bit of trouble with planting human peppers. Now they're black market oligarchs dealing in seeds. And they are still dealing with the loss of their livestock due to a simple mistake. You should see all the grazing statues they made of their animals in mourning," Miss Rimmicky said with a nod, stepping out from behind her desk and smoothing down the sweater she was wearing. A gift from, well, that's not important. "Now, what I am going to tell you is one of the reasons why a lot of members of the Cinderal Confederation are still wary of humanity. Some even fearing humans despite having them on our side. Actually, Ramira, shut the door to the classroom and pull down the shutter." The Yorpal raised her butter-yellow eyebrows but stood, closing the door and pulling down the slatted window blocker. "Humanity," Miss Rimmicky began as Ramira sat back down, scooting her fluffy tail out of the way, "is still considered an Obram third race. They are helpful, charming, cheerful, and may be some of the most loyal friends you will ever make. But there is a lot of darkness underneath that veneer." Miss Rimmicky pointed to the children play-fighting on the screen. "Humans are ingrained biological warriors. Male children are known to wield wooden sticks as young as 3 years old, and even the younger ages are known to bite, kick, play punch, or attempt to grapple with their parents." "They try to wield fake weapons as young as 3? A male djinn said with a tilt of his masked head, his voice more curious than admonishing. "Why do they do such a thing? Are children not supposed to be cared for tenderly, wrapped in soft clothing and left to the colors of life?" A Kerlaken shrugged. "We Kerlaken are also known to bite at a young age, but it is more of a love bite, if anything." Despite their lack of teeth, even baby humans can impart an impressive amount of pressure for their size, Miss Rimmicky said, turning the slide to show a line of male and female children forming a giggling, skirmishing line, wielding trash can lids, sticks, and wearing cardboard box helmets. This picture was taken by a Poit visitor who was touring about a few human cities. He watched these human children make fake war, practicing working in formations. Then, when traveling across a heavily wooded area, he came upon formations of human children wielding sticks like rifles and practicing tactical movement in the woods. "Why are children being taught these things? Children are meant to grow up free of combat, to fully develop in peace," a female Yorpal asked from near the front, her black fur catching the light oddly. "They aren't," Miss Rimmicky said with a quirked brow. "They learn these things simply by watching. and innately try to mimic them. Human children are drawn to such things naturally, and not even humans know why. They dub it rough and tumble play, and the majority believes it is extremely beneficial to human children as a whole. Now, before you go asking too many questions, yes, there are many human cultures that encourage their children to play fight, pulling them apart just before it goes too far. Human parents believe it builds a foundation of knowing when too far is too far, as well as courtesies and customs. Miss Rimmicky tapped the pad of her finger to her hand, and the display pulled up the next image. The real question that a lot of us have been asking is why? Earth is considered a death world, and there has been a renewed debate on whether that is for the planet or what lives on it. Thousands of years of wars have honed humans into the perfect predator. One that can break, tear, and kill when it feels a need to. Worst of all are its side effects. Side effects? Ajin asked, all of her arms crossed. Is not being able to kill easily a side effect on its own? Miss Rimmicky pulled up an image by quickly tapping along her palm, and a picture of Ted Bundy filled the display. Assassins and the like are nothing new. They kill for pay, and it is a profession. There have been very few serial killers amongst the races of the Confederation, usually marked as mentally broken people that are quickly eradicated. Tintle, another black-furred Yorple, perked up her ears. Yes, Miss Rimmicky? How many murderers has Yorple kind had over the last, say, 500 years? Tintle closed her eyes, trying to think, then cocked her head as she opened her eyes. 3, 4. I think 4 is right. Cendric, how many have the Kerlikan had in the same time frame? Miss Rimmicky asked. 17. Cendric asked, tapping his clawed hand on his tabletop. Rendry? Miss Rimmicky called out. The point folded her hands. I believe we have had 10, the last one cropping up over 30 years ago after the Federal Station Massacre. Miss Rimmicky continued this pattern of asking, each pointing out the drastically low number of serial killers that each race had among the ranks of their people. When she was finished, Miss Rimmicky folded her arms under her chest. This is because we are not innately a murderous group of races. Yes, we all have our issues from time to time, but for the most part, we cannot be called bloodthirsty or murderous. Humans in the last 500 years have had over 10,000 serial killers just in the unified American states alone, and that is not even counting the European coalition, Miss Rimmicky said, taking an odd pleasure in the horrified faces of her students as she dropped the bombshell. Now, you may be asking yourself why they would kill like this. And yes, there are a lot of cases referring to mental breaks or other such problems of the self, as even our brains can short-circuit from time to time. You may also find it quite odd that during the war with the Daramir, these issues decreased amongst humans. Ajin held up one of her forearms. It decreased? It decreased, Miss Rimmicky said darkly, tapping her fingers along her palm to bring up a few images of the humans engaging in hand-to-hand combat with the insectoid Daramir, as well as gun battles. When the humans had an enemy to fight and were fighting for a cause they saw as good or righteous, their serial killers dropped nearly 70%, as well as a slew of mental and stress issues. If anything, a lot of the Interconfederation scholars believe the overall mood of humans rose significantly. A male point leaned back in his chair, looking up at the display. They liked it. They did, Miss Rimmicky said. They had no wars to wage upon themselves as they were all too advanced, and it would lead to, as one human put it, an unsportsmanlike slaughter. They were spiking in mental health issues with these random killings on the rise. Then came the Confederation for their help, and they had a unified target to unleash their frustrations. Tinto ran her clawed paw along her head. Oh, shit. I get it now. I believe you will all understand it quite soon, Miss Rimmicky murmured. Earth, this little blue marble we are hurtling around in this station, breeds the finest predators to have ever touched the stars. Predators honed over tens of thousands of years, of human-on-human conflict. Predators honing themselves on hunting and killing other predators. Even in times of peace, they kept about this practice. Lawful predators hunting and capturing rogue predators that predated on the local populace. The darkness coming out of them slowly out of mental illness, boredom, or a simple desire to kill. My fellow scholars and I have identified 3 key types of humans. Miss Rimmicky tapped along her palm with her finger pads, and the display pulled up 3 pictures of humans. One was a mother with a sad but defiant look on her face. Another was a human soldier, his face bearing a long scar along his cheek. And another was a smiling woman wearing an odd orange jumpsuit. First, there is the reluctant killer, Miss Rimmicky began, pointing to the sad woman. These humans can and will kill when pushed, though they are not outwardly presenting as such and are more in line with the rest of us. If their child is threatened or themselves, they will lash out with a wild, feral energy. They will then suffer mentally from the kill, but most get over it in time. These seem quite normal. I would have assumed that most of humanity is made up of this kind. A male opticon asked in practiced ease, gesturing with a claw towards the display. Less than what you would think, but yes, most. Miss Rimmicky mused, then pointed to the soldier. Most humans fall into this category. These kinds of humans are seen as actual predators and are judicial killers. They are not reluctant, nor do they like doing it, but they can easily kill once a set of protocols are broken. Humans, despite what we think of them, have a rather simple set of rules they live by that keep them from killing. Once you break those rules, however, they will snuff out life without a second thought and not even lose sleep over it. To this kind of human, to break the protocols they have set makes you less than a beast, a monster requiring dealing with. The room was quiet, but a slow claw was raised in the air, a female opticon breaking the silence. What kind of protocols? Hurting the innocent is the easiest to break, Miss Rimmicky said, her mind already pulling up the passages she read about human philosophy. To attack a non-combative woman, a mother, or a child is seen as the quickest way to activate a human and have them shed blood. The traffical incident is the best example of this. A Carelacan leaned his head back, actually letting out a small hissing laugh. Ah, yes. When a Lemurian trader slapped a human child for getting in his way. From what I understand, a female human and 2 males fractured the Lemurian's skull to the point it looked like broken pottery, a red Yorpal murmured, remembering the images of the gray, brutish face of the man looking bent and out of shape. I believe they beat him to death. She did, Miss Rimmicky replied. Her fury was so fierce that they couldn't even pull the female human off of him whose child had been slapped in the first place. Tensions were a little high at that point, to be fair, but it made a lot of us shrink away from humanity as the war was winding down. Regardless, there are other protocols such as taking property, risking life of themselves, and other such things that are easily avoidable. Even more confusing is that many of their protocols are not attached to only humans. They expand to everyone and anything. Humans have been known to batter other races to near death over infractions to other races, such as the Fremere Market incident, where a Yorpal child was being harassed by a gang of Prilfar traders. When a human caught wind of what was going on, he approached them and told them to leave the child alone. When they refused and kicked the child, he single-handedly brutalized all 8 of the Prill, then impaled the leader on the broken spike of a stall when she pulled a blade and tried to take the young Yorpal as a shield. This is the first instance of an escalation of human protocols being seen in real time, as well as galvanizing the Yorpal friendship with the humans. Miss Rimmicky pressed her lips into a disgusted line, then pointed to the woman in the orange clothing. Then there are these. These are murderers, serial killers, and dregs of human society. These are the rogue predators that hide amongst the first 2 types of humans, killing whatever they please for the pleasure of it. These kinds of humans have been offered on loan for research, and their brains are terrifying. Killing, blood, organs, the screams of the dying, they are things of beauty to these kinds of humans and elicit the same kind of brain response as eating ice cream or watching a favorite movie. Company 13, a female djinn said under her breath. Company 13, Miss Rimmicky confirmed quietly, her head fronds giving a curt shake as she rested a thick hip against her desk. The darkest mark on humans during war. Humanity, knowing their surplus of perfect predatory killers and desiring to empty their legions of jail cells, created Company 13. And we all got to see what happens when a human is honed to its sharpest edge. Murderers and serial killers armed with energy blades and other melee weapons along with armor were sent in suicide-charging waves. They decimated the Daramir, cackling and howling as they did while the regular military forces of the humans mopped up behind them. The attack on the Daramir's secondary capital planet was headlined by Company 13, and they slaughtered everything around them. This person, Amanda Jute, is one of the few survivors of Company 13 and recalls all her memories of slaughter fondly. There are other survivors that managed to steal Daramir ships, and only a small handful made it past the human anti-air units. A female point sighed out. So there are loose among the stars then? This little handful of feral humans? For the most part, they hide well, which is terrifying in of itself. That is what really troubles the Confederation. The last two types of humans blend in seamlessly to normal society. You will never know you're near one unless someone breaks a protocol, or they decide to kill you. Humanity's cold calculation and combat strategy did do away with nearly 95% of its prison-held murderers, but that does not mean they are all gone. Miss Rimmicky said with a sigh. No, that was only the ones they had caught, the ones that had gotten sloppy. What all of you may not know is that there is a shadow war ongoing with humans. The judicial predators trying to sneak and snuff out the rogue predators before they can do too much damage, or to stop them altogether. Worse is that these rogue predators can hide anywhere. What are you trying to say, Miss Rimmicky? A blue opticon asked. Miss Rimmicky drummed her nails along the top of her desk, thinking over the words with pursed lips, then stood back up fully onto her feet. The reason why the Confederation is so scared of humans now, after the war, why you are in this class with no humans present, is that they want to arm you with knowledge. Humans are, for the most part, good. They are good people with big hearts and have a lot of love to give. But there is a dark shadow over them that looms in the day and night. Judicial human predators and rogue human predators are seamless, hiding in plain sight. There is estimated to be hundreds of thousands of rogue predators laying in wait, or are so clever that they have yet to even be found. There is estimated to be millions of judicial predators walking amongst you, and a simple mistake will set them off onto a path of bloodshed. Earth, for all its beauty, has created two of the most perfect predators to ever grace the stars, and their savagery is unmatched. Most scary is how calm they are when they go about their business. Then why not get rid of them then? Why not go through with you and other psychic races and root out the problem? A point asked. Her fully colored blue eyes narrowed. They can't hide from the truth of the mind. Miss Rimmicky grinned fangedly, though her eyebrows were morose. You would think so, but they hide just as well there as they would on the sidewalk. Humans are immune to mental interdiction, and they are instantly aware of it as well. The more clever rogue humans even laid down false trails that led us on a merry chase. A crack team of investigators tried, but found themselves outclassed by even the reluctant humans, shutting them out as if they slammed a door. This made the Confederation so afraid that many began to wonder if we had accidentally opened a box that we can't shut again. The thing hidden inside bursting out and wrapping itself around us. What we have to do, what all of you have to do, is understand who is walking with you, who is eating with you, and who you are talking to. Miss Rimmicky started, but a dull chime rang around the room, and she sighed. We will pick up on this later. Class dismissed. Everyone within picked up their shoulder bags or sling bags, looping them around shoulders as they all filed out of the classroom. Ramira had her eyebrows furrowed in thought when Tintle bumped her shoulder into her and she snapped out of her thoughts. I figured it out, Tintle said smugly, squeezing next to Ramira as a Carlican slithered by. Ramira rolled her eyes. Figured what out? The odd smell? The one we both smelled in yesterday's lesson about the Daramir War. Tintle replied, gesturing towards her chest with her pawed hands. It was all over her sweater, and I know what it is. Ramira blinked at Tintle, not responding like the other Yorple wanted her to, and just waiting for her to blurt it out. Tintle, tired of waiting, leaned in towards Ramira's ear. Human. Ramira raised her brows, though she was less impressed. Very curious. Though, from what I've heard from my sister, their smell gets all over the place. How do you know it wasn't sold by a human from a store? It would smell like a human that way, too. It smelled like a male human, Tintle said in a frustrated growl. That has to mean something. Ramira smirked. Means the traitor must have been human. I agree. Ugh, Tintle muttered, feeling a little deflated after Ramira refused to acknowledge her find. How's your sister, anyway? Oh, she's still down there playing with the humans. I think she said something about conbratives or something like that. It sounded fun, though, Ramira said, unwrapping earthen chewing gum from a foil wrapper. Our parents send me some credits to buy her some new boots and such. I'll be dropping down over the weekend to see her. Tintle chuckled. May want to pack her some bandages, too, or some reactive healing pads. Freren landed face first into the fighting pit, rolling along in a brief ragdoll as the sun stuck to her dull yellow fur and pieces of protective gear came flying off of her. Ooh, Himmel hissed out, bringing his balled fists up near his chin. Ooh, I know that didn't feel good. Zetrin hummed in his throat, then turned to Himmel. She is getting pummeled out there. Freren groaned, then slowly came up onto her knees, picking up the pugil stick back up and slipping her helmet back onto her head. She was fighting Renee today, who, despite looking rather normal, was beating the absolute hell out of her. The human had an impressive way of moving her body weight around, but the full body check made her think that a lot of the weight was in her chest. Come on, furry. Back up you come. Renee called out cheekily, twirling her pugil stick. Drill sergeant ain't gonna let you off that easy. Nothing about this has been easy, Freren muttered, brushing some of the sand away from her face and getting back up onto her feet fully. She had watched the humans dominate the other races during this kind of training, and while they were definitely toughening them up, it was still a struggle for the Yorple and Poit. They were getting demolished by their respective gender equivalents, and it was becoming quite evident that they were, indeed, built different. The Carelakins were adapting at least, and the humans seemed to love sparring with them. I can't wait for the Jinn to join us, Freren called out, bringing the pugil back into guard. Going to be cathartic watching them wipe those smiles off your faces. Renee and the other humans chuckled. As that may be, they ain't here yet. And you have to land 6 strikes on me in order to pass. Freren looked over to the other pummeled members of her race, and they were watching her intently. None of them had managed to pass either, and it was up to her to try and get them a win. Freren shook her head, then slowly stepped back into the fray with Renee. The strike was quick, and Freren managed to barely duck it, ramming the head of her pugil stick into Renee's stomach as her ears were whacked painfully by Renee's pugil. Renee stumbled back a step, coughing out a laugh as the other humans all held up 4 fingers. Come on, Freren, just 2 more, Himmel called out, slapping the wooden boards that made up the ring of the fighting pit. Zetrin looked over to another Carelagan. I see that I was right in assuming this would be easier for us. I believe them wrapping our tails in a pugil pad helped, the other Carelagan said, and she giggled. Extra weapon. True, Zetrin laughed back, and he turned in time to see Frerin whack Renee on the side of the head. 5! The humans called out, but the strike had deeply angered Renee. Renee spun her pugil stick around and lunged towards Frerin at speed, and Frerin's guard was easily broken by the swift uppercut, sending the Yorple staggering backwards with faltering steps before she crashed to the sand again. All the Yorple hissed out in pain as Frerin groaned from the ground, her tail wagging a little in submission as she fumbled around in the sand, trying to find her pugil stick with warbling vision. "Renee!" a male human private said, wiggling his finger back and forth reproachfully. "That was too much." Renee scoffed. "She hit me!" "She's supposed to hit you where she can," he said, then crossed his arms. "You were told not to hit them in the face." Renee went to shout at the human, but Frerin's pugil stick bounced off of her back. Renee looked confused, then turned around, looking over at Frerin, wavering on her knees, and her arms still cast forward with her throw. 6! Another female human private laughed out, clapping her hands. "You turned your back to an enemy, and she got you." "Damn it!" Renee spat, throwing her pugil to the ground. "He distracted me!" All the voices became quiet as Drill Sergeant Marshall stepped out from where she was hiding amongst them, the privates parting out of her way and her brown campaign hat catching the sun. "You let yourself be distracted, while the Yorple stayed on mission," Drill Sergeant Marshall said, placing her hands on her hips as she stared down at Frerin. "Your lack of discipline allowed you to catch a strike to the back." Frerin smiled up in a daze at Drill Sergeant Marshall, while blood trickled from her nose and mouth. "You are bleeding," Drill Sergeant Marshall said matter-of-factly down at Frerin, still smiling at the Yorple. Frerin nodded. "Uh-huh, Drill Sergeant. You also took down a human in melee combat. How does that feel?" Drill Sergeant Marshall asked. "Like my face hurts," Frerin said honestly, then spat out a mouthful of blood down into the sand. Drill Sergeant Marshall laughed, a true laugh, then reached down and hauled Frerin up to her feet. "You never failed to impress me, Specialist Frerin." Wait, Himmel said, clapping his hands. "Promoted! She just got promoted!" Himmel took off at a run around the ring, his hands held high as he made a loop around the now cheering and battered other Yorple. "Promoted!" Himmel screamed again, making it around a loop of the ring, and started slapping at Zetrin's arm. "She did it! She's the first non-human promotion!" Zetrin, quickly tiring of the slapping, whacked Himmel with his still pugil pad-bearing tail. "Be quiet, Himmel. Sheesh." Promoted? Frerin asked, her mind still buzzing with the uppercut as Drill Sergeant Marshall steadied her. "Huh? Why?" Drill Sergeant Marshall smiled at her. "Because you showed the right kind of mettle." "Still!" The humans all called out at once, catching the other races off guard. Drill Sergeant Marshall half turned to look at the human recruits. "Steel Souls! Iron Hearts!" They all called back, then half bowed in respect to Frerin. Frerin was still confused, even as Drill Sergeant Marshall pulled out the black metal rank and took the pin guards off. "Steel what?" "A soul of steel that cannot be broken," Drill Sergeant Marshall said reverently, removing Frerin's old rank from her right lapel and placing the new rank just into the cloth so it stayed. "A heart of iron that cannot be turned." Frerin blinked at Drill Sergeant Marshall and would have smiled, except the woman had reared her fist back. "Huh?" Frerin managed to say. Then Drill Sergeant Marshall's fist slammed into her rank, and the Yorple felt the metal pins bury themselves into her collarbones. Frerin held up a pair of clawed hands curled in pain, her face twisted. Then she let out a screech of agony, pulling on her lapel and jerking the pins out of her body. Drill Sergeant Marshall chuckled, then held Frerin still as she placed the guards onto the now bloody pins. "She's official now, eh, lads?" Drill Sergeant Marshall called out, pushing the still hissing and spitting Frerin towards the other human recruits. "Steel and iron!" They called out with whooping cheers, hefting the still cursing Frerin into the air as the other races clapped and whistled at her.